Good morning, and thank you for registering for today's virtual session, Client-Centric Innovation, Embracing AI and Automation. My name is Alex Taylor, and I'm the Manager of Digital Experience Programs for NC Tech. NC Tech is an association dedicated to being the unifying voice for North Carolina's tech sector and focuses in the areas of advocacy, talent development, events and programming, and professional networks. If you would like to learn more about the work NC Tech is doing, please visit nctech.org. This session is a part of NC Tech's virtual programming series where NC Tech members lead thought-provoking sessions on topics pertinent to the North Carolina tech sector. If you would like to learn more about upcoming events, including other virtual workshops like this one you're on now, please visit nctech.org/events. Now, for a couple of housekeeping rules for today's session. This session will be recorded, with the recording being sent out to all registrants after this session concludes. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, feel free to drop them in the chat. We also will have a Q&A section at the end of this session. So just feel free to either drop a question in the chat or come off mic and ask it in person. Either way works, and we'll definitely carve out some time for that. But I wanted to thank Ulysses Tech for sponsoring today's session, and then I wanted to pass it now off to Alejandro to get started.
Thank you very much, Alex. Thank you to you and NC Tech for helping us hosting this event. And welcome everyone. My name is Alejandro. I'm a director of Ulysses Tech. And I've been working in the IT sector for more than 25 years. Ulysses Tech is an IT outsourcing and nearshoring firm based in Costa Rica, Central America. We basically are focused in four main disciplines, which are digital customer experience, intelligent automation, data analytics and artificial intelligence, and software development. And we often partner with EY Central America in order to help North American customers go to the next level in these areas by tapping into Latin American talent. With me today is Luis Barbosa. Luis is a seasoned technology professional with more than 10 years of experience. He specializes in guiding clients through their technology transformations, and currently he leads 4 distinct practices at EY Central America: quality assurance, technology business analyst, technology program management, and digital experience design. And he will be the main speaker today. So with that, I'll hand it over to you, Luis. Good morning, and thank you for being here.
Thanks, Alejandro, and hi, everyone. Good morning, and thanks for joining and carving some time of your busy schedules to share this space with us. So this is our agenda. We'll try to cover as much of it as possible, but our idea is to have a conversation with you guys and tell you what we have seen in the past year, 2 years in the market around this automation space, artificial intelligence space, and how we have tidied it all together with a client-centric approach. So here we'll start with an overview of the roundtable of who we are. We'll show you a little bit of latest trends that we have seen. We'll show you our approach to these trends. And the main part will be some of our success stories that we would like to share with you to how we have seen in the market and how to work with us. So starting with an overview, Alejandro mentioned it a little bit. We work out of Central America and Dominican Republic. We have teams all around Central America with very different skill sets that have led us to lead projects in all of these areas. And that has given us a lot of feedback into what the market is doing in different areas. And it gives us an holistic approach that we know how to solve with different technologies. So we have a very varied team and a very big scope of the technologies that we have worked with. But for this session, we're going to focus a little bit on some of these pain points that you may or may not identify with, that we have seen a lot in this area. Even though we have advanced a lot in the technology space, for some reason, these things kind of still creep up and it is still showing in the organizations, slow response time, all legacy applications, a lot of overwhelming amounts of documentations, a lack of customer insight. This is a lot of the things that we are still seeing today, even on the most technologically savvy organizations. And we have found an approach using digital engineering and analytics and AI to help solve some of these issues and plan for it to be solved in the long run, right? Not just have the latest for today, but to make sure that we have a scalable way of dealing with all of this so that they don't creep up again in 5 years. That is something we have seen a lot of. So before we get into how we have solved some of these issues, I'd like to share a little bit with you some of the sentiment that we are seeing in the market. So you might identify with things that we're seeing. So interestingly enough, a large portion of the CEOs believe that we need to start our digital transformation with AI, like over 65% of them believe so. But the important thing is that 67% of them have failed in the transformations in the past. And I believe this is a conversation that we have every 5 to 10 years, that now is the time to start transformation. And ever since the technology boom, like this is something that continues to creep up, right? So why are we constantly transforming and we never seem to get there? So some of the things that we're seeing is that we have two approaches that we have seen in the market, and why things keep on failing is sometimes people start small locally in different teams and they don't have like an organizational wide approach, which has occurred in what I mentioned, that maybe you start today and you have a great success, but in 5 years, again, the technology has deprecated or is not longer the latest and greatest, and we are having this conversation again, which is why what we don't want to do. What we want to do is create a plan that scales with time so that we have finally like an organizational wide approach, a strategic approach with automation, artificial intelligence, that we keep up with the technology and we don't have to keep transforming every 5 years, right? I think everyone has experienced that, where we have this big impact transformation, let's do it, and then 5 years later, things stop there. So that's something that we are seeing a lot of. Everybody says they're ready to transform. Everybody says AI is the next big thing, but nobody is actually taking steps to making sure that it is scalable and that we don't have to redo everything in 2, 3, 4, 5 years. So this is something that we're seeing a lot of in the market. And the way we're solving this and our approach, interestingly enough, is to focus on what's important. And what's important here is the people. So we're here to talk about technology, I know, and we will show you some of the latest things that we have done there. But the key differentiator and the key reason why we can make this work is if we focus on the people. So we have a humans at the center approach, where I absolutely love this Venn diagram, where we have 3 key pillars that if one of them is missing, we're not going to succeed. So we have the design, the usability, where we focus on the humans, the technology to make things feasible, that we can actually make them, and the business, the viability of it. And you have no idea how many clients we have come up with where they have the business side, they have the technology side, but they forget that design and that usability. And that's where things kind of stop working, where you go from theory to the practice and it doesn't flow. I like to give a great example here to kind of show the importance of this design and this usability with a very known success story. For example, Amazon. I'm sure most of you have seen Amazon, have used Amazon a lot. Nobody had to teach you how to use it, right? You just log in and you know what to do there. And even one step further, Amazon knows what you want, right? How did they get there? So they do the combination of usability, viability, and feasibility to make sure that things work in the long term. A lot of examples like Uber, for example, where you download the app and you just jump right in and you don't need anybody to hold your hand. You just know how to use it. It's very intuitive. And this is the trends that we're seeing with companies that have this transformation and that they result in the long term. They're focused a lot on the technology, and a lot of the things they're doing are very advanced from the technology side of things, but they focus on making sure that the users can do it. And we take it a step further, right? We make sure that your clients can use the applications that you create, but also your users, your employees can use the tools that you provide them with to make sure that they are taken advantage of. We have seen a lot of times where we do this huge spending to create this new tool that is going to solve all of our problems. And once it hits production, once the users start using it, they're not comfortable with it. The change management doesn't work. And this is because in the design step, we didn't think of humans. So I just want to leave you with that to make sure that you understand that it is very important to focus on the design as much as we're focusing on the technology here today and the business side of things, because that design and that usability is what's going to make your applications and your innovation succeed in the long run and not just for this quarter, right? So I want to jump in now to the main course of it, where I want to share with you some of our success stories, right? What have we done in the market? What have we seen? How have we solved these problems? To kind of give you like a real case scenarios of the things that we can work with. So this is a very interesting case, and it is probably one of the most not successful, but comprehensive cases that we've had in the past 6 months with a financial institution here in Central America, where they allowed us to come in with them from the design stages and kind of do like a big scan of what their problems were. So every time we come in and jump into a new client, we see that they already think they know what's wrong. And sometimes they say, okay, I need this point fixed, and come in and check that out. But in here, we had a different approach. They just let us, they told us, okay, these are the things that we think are wrong, but please come in and do like a quick assessment, a comprehensive understanding of where our organization is in terms of user experience, in terms of automation, in terms of technology usage, and then create a roadmap for us to kind of see how we can fix these things, how we scale them in the next 3 months, 6 months, and a year. So that's what we did with them. We did a 6 to 8 week period, which is not very long, and we tried to make this fast so that we don't spend 6 months doing a comprehensive analysis where when we finish, everything's irrelevant now because things changed. So we did a very quick analysis. We sat down with them. We went physically to their like businesses. We traveled all around the country to see different businesses and see how things actually worked. We even purchased some of their products to kind of see the flow of things. We also came in the back end with the users, had interviews with them to understand where these pain points were happening, to see where the leadership was a disconnect with the day-to-day users. And after we did all that mapping and all that comprehensive understanding, we could finally sit down and think about the technology side of things and how these different problems that they were having could have different solutions that all talk to each other and that they're all woven in and make sure and are cohesive within each other, and not just solve this little problem here with an automation and then have everything else be a bottleneck to it, and then you don't have things work. So that was the problem that they were having. They were having a lot of problems with their end customers. Some of their products were not moving as they were expecting. So we did this analysis and we came up with a solution, like I mentioned, an interesting roadmap that we wove in the different technologies, the complexities of them, because if a lot of companies come to us and say, we need to use AI, for example, right? But AI is very broad. AI, like you cannot just start and say, let me implement AI here. You need a lot of work before that to see where AI would be used. You need a lot of data gathering, a lot of information. Otherwise, like I mentioned, it will not succeed. So we created a roadmap for them to kind of see how we could get to using AI, how we could get to using automation, how we could get to using this design of the client journey so that it was scalable and that it actually worked. So this is something that we did in the course of around 6 to 8 weeks to kind of give them an idea. And this was just the beginning. So after we did all of this comprehension, we then categorized it, make sure that we understood the different pain points that the different areas were having to kind of bucket them in different areas, and that we could provide one solution to multiple different problems. So we did a lot of data analysis to make sure that we had the tools to work in the technology side. There's a lot of times where people just gather information for the sake of gathering information, then create like dashboards over dashboards. And in the end, you have so many dashboards and so much data, you're not sure exactly what you're looking at. And this was something that was happening to them, that they had a lot of different dashboards and they just created new ones and were gathering these large amounts of data that were not actually being cleansed or used for the right purposes. So we worked a lot on that as well. We created the customer journeys to understand, okay, so a new customer comes in, where do they go? Why are these products not selling as well as the other ones? Is it something from the usability side of things? Is it something that the competition has better products? So we did that whole analysis to kind of understand where the problem was and try to find a solution for it. And we created user personas, which are like the individual, the target audience that they were trying to reach, to understand what their mindset were and create strategy around what they were looking for. And in the end, what we created was this roadmap I was mentioning, with a very short-term way to kind of get returns now. Like I mentioned before in our Venn diagram, we focus a lot on the three areas, right? Business, people, and technology. And for the business side, we understand very clearly that it doesn't work if you give a plan to change things for 2 years and you're not seeing any return or progress in that time. So we like to also include these short-term benefits so that it becomes scalable, right? That the business knows, okay, we have this plan, we start implementing and we see returns right away, right? So we start seeing returns right away, then we have a midterm plan and we see bigger returns then, and then a long-term plan, and it is scalable. It has happened a lot to us in the past, where if you give like a 2-year transformation plan, it's hard to see the value in that. It's hard for businesses to buy into that, because they say, okay, I need to invest all this money for 2 years and then maybe I'll start getting the return after 2 years. So it doesn't work in the practice. So what we are doing is we create these short-term wins linked to our long-term strategy, so that we don't fall into the problem of we create these different silos of things, like kind of small patches all around, where we kind of patch the holes and everything continues, but in 2 years, everything breaks again. So we try to incorporate all of that. And for example, for this client, so we created like 3 or 4 automations that right away, they just made things more efficient, right? We just have a lot of different automations using intelligent automation and artificial intelligence to make sure that some of their longest running processes were shortened down, the mistakes were shortened down, and everything was a lot more efficient. In the midterm, we started creating some data strategies to make sure that the data that they were gathering could help us in the long term have real metrics, real KPIs, and have a more empowered approach to AI. And that's actually where we are right now. We're in the midterm with this client, and we're working towards that long term, where they will have a more comprehensive solution in their websites, in their stores, in the way that they gather data. And we have worked all along with different steps, so that in the long term, we can have something that is scalable and that can continue no matter the changes in technology. They're a lot easier and quicker to react to it. And so this is the strategy that we're currently working with them. We already completed the short term, midterm, and we're working towards the long term. And it has worked wonders with this financial institution, because if you know, like, financial institutions are very complex to work with, because they have a lot of regulations, budgeting constraints. They're very big and they're very hard to make changes in the technology. So this approach has worked wonders, because they are seeing incremental benefits, incremental approaches where they see the value right now. And it is easy for them to keep that conversation going with the board, right? So they have this return, they already know that it's working. Now they need this time to get this new return. And in this situation, what we did was we invested a lot at the beginning in automation, in a lot of different bots that made the operation a lot smoother, while we worked on this client journey and experience to improve and make sure that their end-to-end product was worth it. So this is one of our best examples of how a holistic approach and using different technologies can really help create a strategy long-term for a big institution, and where we can work with them in the long term, and they're happy, like we're happy, and everybody sees how things are flowing. We also have some examples a little bit smaller, where maybe we did not get that full interaction of making sure that we created an organizational-wide approach, because like I mentioned, not everyone gives us the opportunity to kind of come in from the beginning, but we can also help in some more smaller scale pinpointed scenarios. So for example, we had this customer experience app that we helped create, where they had, and I think this has happened to all of us, where we have one app from one vendor, and then we have the database from another vendor, and then the support is given by another vendor, and then we have our own internal systems where they need to connect, right? So we have this mishmash of different areas where we have to talk to different people, and they were having a lot of issues with that. And interestingly enough, they looked at us for just the experience side of things. So we would have been another vendor on top of the different vendors they were having. So they did not have like a strategic approach to it. They just said, we need this done, let's just hire a different vendor to do it. But once we came in, we kind of tried to show them how, if we have a more integrated approach, we could revamp this day-to-day app, that it was the core thing that they were used, to make sure that it's not just having these different solutions all around, but where we could implement some automations, maybe some user experience to focus on the client, maybe in the future have a roadmap for some AI that we can add to it. And then the solution becomes more than just a new app that in a year or 2 years, it might fall off, like most technology do. So we try to open their eyes to see that maybe we need to have this be a more comprehensive approach, even though it's just a part of the business, one app. We did talk with them, and after we did that initial design and showed them a little bit that we care a lot about the users, we did interviews. This was for drivers specifically, so we had our team go in and sit down with the drivers and see the day-to-day of how they use the app, where can things be automated, where can things be improved. And after all of that, they really liked the design that we did. And we moved on to not just designing it, but implementing it and trying to remove a lot of that overweight that they had with 3 or 4 different vendors, and try to consolidate everything into something that can be automated and work with all the different tools and integrate it better into their systems, and not have all the different vendors connect within each other. So this was one where we did not have the opportunity to come in just with an organizational-wide strategy, but our approach of always focusing in the human, the business, and the technology kind of gave them the view of how we could approach this problem, kind of solve it with not just one solution, but something that is more comprehensive, more holistic, that kind of takes everything into consideration, with a solution that can last and can evolve in the long term. Something that I mentioned at the beginning is we're really tired of seeing every 5 years where we need to transform again, right? Technology changes, and we have another technology transformation now with everything that's new, and then we have a couple of failed ones, and then we successfully transformed, and then 5 years later, technology changed again, and we need to transform again, right? And we're trying to avoid that. We're trying to make sure that we create a basis for change that is scalable, that we can keep in the long term, and whenever something new comes, it can be implemented seamlessly and not have to go with this like completely overall transformation of everything we have done in the past. Because we're seeing that companies are tired of having to transform every time, and really whenever something goes wrong after 2 years, it kind of leaves people a little bit scared of trying new technology, and they say, why am I going to spend a lot of time changing this where I have something that works, and let's just continue doing the things there. So this was one case where we managed to do that. This app is already in production, and they're really happy about it. And I have to say, it was one of the most satisfying feelings where we had the first 2 weeks of this app going to production. We had the whole support model waiting for it, right? We had the people waiting for the feedback, for the issues to come in. And we had, I think, 2 calls in the first week from users, but we really didn't have that impact, and it just flowed seamlessly into the users. And out of those 2 calls, one was from an outside vendor that they didn't do something correctly. So it was very interesting to see how, if you take into consideration that design and that automation where we can make things easier for the user to use and kind of reduce the amount of meaningless steps that they have to take, it really makes things flow a lot better with the technology. It makes things better received, and it helps us as an organization to change things and have them be embraced by the clients and by our users, and they become part of the transformation, part of the change. And then they will hold these standards with everything that we do and make sure that every new application that we work with is scalable, it's usable, and it works going forward. So this was one very close to us, where we were very happy with the results of it going to production, and these drivers just being able to use it right away with almost no complaints. It was very, very satisfying to see that our plan from the beginning worked for them. So another one I want to share with you guys, and this is more geared towards a lot of pharmaceutical industries or a lot of industries that work with governmental agencies, where we know the documentation that goes with it. So there's a lot of paperwork that we have seen that still goes on to this day, that slows organizations down, that makes users miserable and make clients miserable. So whenever a client comes to an organization, asks to see a new product, asks for something, and they take 2-3 days to respond, they get annoyed and kind of walk away from this. And this is something that happens a lot in the medical industry, pharmaceutical industry, also the financial industry, where there's a lot of regulations. And this is something that we have tried to tackle very strongly here as well, with automation. So this is a lot focused on the technology side of things, maybe not so much with the user. But if you recall what we've said, that we always take those into consideration, even though we're dealing with 100% just automation, just pure hard technology, where we have AI, robots just go through documents. In the end, the benefits and the impact is to the end user as well. So we never lose track of that. So we had this, and there's a lot of cases, but we have this one specifically for the California Consumer Privacy Act compliance that one client had. But really, we have so many use cases where documentation is so heavily needed to perform and open a new client, for example, or give information to a customer, or open like a new insurance for a new customer. So we have done a lot of automation to make sure to reduce the amount of hours and to increase the response time. And this is something that really makes people happy at both ends. So the guy that had to do it before is really happy because he doesn't have to spend a week mailing back and forth and getting these documents and kind of putting things together. And the end user, the customer, is really happy because something that used to take 1 or 2 weeks now is a lot faster for them. And so they get that immediate response. You can have our guys kind of talk with them and be more engaged while the robots work in the background, and they get a lot more interaction. So even though this is an approach that we have done mostly from the technology and the business side of things, where we see the results from the user side of things is where we know that we're in the right track. So a lot of automations with compliance comes down to 2 things: reducing the amount of hours it takes to do a specific task. In this case, we saved around 1,500 hours per month. But also something that people usually don't take into consideration is we reduce the risk of mistakes. So people doing this kind of work, maybe make mistakes along the way. And that creates a lot of rework, a lot of issues where we need to do things again. So by reducing that boring, mundane, repetitive work with automation, reading documents with AI, maybe understanding what the client is with AI and having a robot work in the background with automation, we reduce the rework that we need to do. So from the business side of things, we reduce the risk, we reduce the amount of hours that these tasks need to be performed. And we also increase the happiness of our employees, where they know that they don't have to work on these boring tasks for 1,500 hours a month. And the end customer is very happy with the results. So like I mentioned at the beginning, I think that's one of the core things that I want everyone here to take with them, is by having that human at the center approach, making we see the feasibility, the usability, and the viability of our projects, then we know we're creating something that will last the test of time and that will hold on the technology side of things, that the business will be on board and they will see the returns, and that the users, both our clients and our employees, will be very happy with the results. So that was one with the compliance that we have seen so many times, where something very simple can have a big impact in the customer experience that they're having. And another one that we have seen was another very similar to the one before, with a global payment consolidation. For some reason, every time we work with a US company where they need to consolidate payments from either taxes, clients, invoices, it's always complicated, right? So do you have hundreds, thousands of customers doing different payments at different times with different invoices? Maybe they combine invoices. So it's a very complicated process for a human, that it's very taxing, very time demanding, and also it comes with a lot of mistakes. So this is one that the last one was very focused on saving time. This is very focused on saving mistakes, where in here AI can be a very, very big help, AI with automation, where you can kind of have this very highly automated. And for this particular client that we did this work, we reduced the human error by almost 90%. So I think everywhere else where you say you would reduce the error by 90%, that would be crazy to even consider. But that's something that we are at right now. Like, we can do this with technology. There's a lot of different areas where that mundane, repetitive, minute work, where you need to put a lot of attention to that 0.01 or that comma or that dollar amount, that can be taxing to humans. There's something that we can automate a lot with data and with good data models and with good automation, with good AI. And you still have the same positive results from the end user side of things. They receive less calls asking about the invoices because we know that we got the right ones. Our employees, again, will be very happy that they don't have to spend a lot of demanding time doing this mundane work. And from the business side of things, I mean, everybody can say they're happy with 90% reduction error in any of our tasks, let alone when it's talking about invoices and money. So really, this is a lot of the things that we're seeing, where if we don't have that organizational wide approach at the beginning with the first case, there's a lot of different things that we can do on the small scale to kind of help create this environment of excellence and this environment of scalability with the projects, where we can also come in and kind of provide this value, where the business say, okay, yeah, this is interesting. Let's discuss and let's create a strategy at the organizational wide, where we can kind of have similar results across multiple different scenarios. So we understand the difficulties of talking with the CEOs, the board, that sometimes it is hard to get that organizational wide approach, where we can kind of have a 6 to 8 week imprint of what they're doing and how we can help create that approach. But something that we have done a lot of is come in with one particular business unit, create these small business cases, pilot cases that we know are scalable, that we know we can implement into a larger strategy once it's implemented. And when people start seeing the value, then we can have that conversation of let's make this an organizational-wide approach and not just different silos creating different things that, if not maintained properly, in 5 years it will be obsolete, and then you'll have to start all over again. So those are some of the examples that we like to show of our more successful and most recent cases. Obviously, we have thousands and thousands of examples, but I like to talk about these ones because they represent the core of what we're trying to do, to focus all of this powerful technology, all of the AI, automation, data, but focus it on something that is usable, something that will actually make a difference, and not just having 1,000 dashboards for our C-suite, and then they see them and this is not what I'm looking for, or I'm not sure how to understand all of this. And we're trying to take that focus back a little bit and use all of this powerful technology that we have today to empower the human being, to empower the people to use these tools, to make them feel like they're part of their work, and they will be the ones asking us to have similar approaches all around the company, and help us push for that strategy to make sure that everything that we build will be feasible, usable, and also scalable in the long term. So now finishing up, I know I have just a few more minutes before the Q&A. I mentioned this across our conversation here, but we work a lot with the end-to-end discovery of implementations. It's something that we love to do, that we really have a lot of great results with, just coming in as a partner and understand how things are going and how we can make them better in the long term, scalable and usable. But we also have some models where maybe you already have your project and you know where you're going and you have your strategy, and you just need that expertise in the design of the experience for the users, or maybe that AI expertise where you need an expert to kind of help you plug in things, or maybe you already have the processes you want to automate. And we have also helped a lot in those models where we can have some of our people share that expertise and help realize those projects. We do both approaches. We really enjoy doing both of them. And we have had great success with both of them, always keeping in mind that the user is the key, and that we need to make everything we build usable so that it is scalable and that it can work in the long term. So I really like to talk a lot, but I think now it's a good time to kind of stop and open up to a few of the questions for you guys, so that you can also share with us some of those questions. So Alex, if you would.
All right. Yeah, so now we are entering into like the audience Q&A portion of the session. So if you have any questions, feel free to either come off mute and say them out loud, or you can drop them in the chat. You can send them directly to me if you don't feel comfortable for it being in the chat for everyone to see. But if you have any questions, feel free to ask them now and just come off mute, put them in the chat. I did want to kind of prompt some engagement with the first question to our audience members. What are the main blockers to seamless customer experience and operational efficiency within your organization? What are the biggest challenges or pain points you've encountered in the past 3 to 6 months? So if you don't have a question, but if you want to answer that question, feel free to drop that in the chat, come off mute while we wait to see if anyone else has any questions.
Yeah, while we wait, I just want to say I love that question and the importance of it. Sometimes we come to these talks, and I know it's NC Tech and everything tech technology, but I like to bring it back a little bit and bring it back to making sure that that tech is usable and that the users are actually using the technology correctly, and make sure that we empower them. Otherwise, it might be just an expensive project that just sits there and is usually not the result that we like. So that's a very good question, and I think that focus is very important. I would love to see what some of our attendees think about it.
We'll wait a couple seconds, see if anything comes in. It does look like we have a question from someone named Alex. What are some strategies you use to ensure that the application is adopted by users?
Oh, that's a great question. And it is very hard to answer because that's the problem that we keep having, right? We create an application and the users don't engage with it. So we have a special team called the user experience team, the digital experience team, where what they do is they come in and they interview the people that are going to use the applications. They put themselves in their shoes. And these are not technically like experienced people, like they're not the ones that build the tools, but they're from the other side. They're more from the business side of things, for the experience side of things, and their specialty is actually called user experience. And what they do is they kind of understand the needs of the user. They have a lot of different strategies that are like just a framework reference where they use it along all the applications that they build. And they're the ones that dictate to our developers how things should be built. So they don't tell us what technologies to use, but they tell us, okay, the end result needs to look like this, needs to feel like this, and needs to have this flow. So we have this interesting dynamic of they're the ones telling the developers how things should feel like. And then we have to go back and forth between what is technically possible and what the best ideal for the user is. And usually this back and forth between these two teams leads to we building something that it is very user friendly and that is being understood by the user. So the solution to that is to have a particular team that deals with user experience, not only like designing things to look pretty, but actually making sure that they follow some design patterns that are usable. And like I mentioned before, some of the examples of how people have done this in the past is a lot of the apps that we use, like Spotify, Uber, and Amazon, like nobody showed you how to use them, but somehow they made it usable. And that's having these type of teams in the back, understanding what the norm is, what users are experiencing, and making sure that what our developers build is aligned to what it is expected. Normally, what we have seen when apps have a bad reception is where we leave the technology team to do all of it, to do the design of it, to do the implementation. And that's where usually we have this application where they feel kind of clunky and they don't feel quite right. It is because there's a lack of this in-between team that really focuses on making sure that everything is usable. I hope I answered your question.
Awesome. I have a question for you, Louise. How do you see organizations best develop a digital technology culture that runs on data-driven insight?
Yeah, that's a great question. And some of the things that we're seeing, we had a conversation with one of our clients recently where they're very technology savvy, like they're on top of the line with data. So they really are already implementing AI models and they're just very on top of things. Like we even thought that they were like, there was nothing else to do in the data gathering space and in the technology space. But the problem that they were having was, I have all this data and I don't know how to use it. I don't know if this is relevant for us. And this was a client that dealt with real estate in the US. And what they were mentioning is, so we have all this data, but we don't have basic information about the people renting our places. We don't have basic information of age group. So there was a lot of questions that nobody had thought of answering, that once we started looking into it, they realized that even though they had terabytes and exabytes of data, they didn't have the key important things that they were using. So data is very tricky. It is tricky in the sense that you can just gather everything imaginable to you, but if you're not thinking about what you need to gather before you start gathering it, is where you start to having this culture of we just have data, we just have dashboards, and we're not actually using it. So that was a very real conversation that we had, and one of the things that we are working with this client is to kind of take a step back and see, okay, maybe you have all of this, but are you sure you're gathering all the information, all the insights from like the customers that you're having, all the insights that are available online, and making sure that you're using them correctly so that it actually makes sense. Another quick example, I don't want to take too much time answering just one question, was from the culture side of things. So we had a lot of clients come in and say, I don't want another dashboard. I hate dashboards. They're useless. Please don't show me another dashboard. And this was just because they were never shown a dashboard that was actually helpful. So they were just resistant culturally, like in the organization, they say, we hate dashboards. And then we come in and we say, why do you hate dashboards? Like sometimes there are better tools and dashboards is not the solution to everything, but sometimes you need a good dashboard to kind of show you things, right? And it was just a matter of design, of understanding the data and making sure that what you have, it is usable. So for this client, I love this story because he said he didn't want a dashboard. We came in and said, okay, we understand. We have reviewed this particular request and we think that the dashboard is the best solution for this one. Let us try it. Let us just show you what can be done once you filter data a little bit and once you have the right approach. And by the end, he was loving it. He really changed his mind. He still doesn't like dashboards and he said he doesn't want anymore. But for that particular case, he was happy with the result. So in the culture, I think it's important to give the users something that they can appreciate and that we're actually gathering the right data to make sure that things make sense, right? So I would say that's a long answer to your question.
Awesome, thanks. We probably have time for like one or two more questions before we do some final parting thoughts. So if you have any questions, feel free to come off mute, drop them in the chat. I will give you another question, Louise, that I had was, how do you see companies best using AI and what areas is it being used most effectively?
Right. So AI is the new big thing, right? Everyone's talking about AI and everyone's trying to do something with AI. And like it's very hard to start understanding where this comes from. So one of the key things with AI is you need to have a very solid data model behind it. So you can just say, I want to do AI and kind of ask your IT team, let's bring in AI for this thing. So you need to have a very solid base for it. So I mentioned a little bit before with this real estate company where they had a lot of data and they were ready to use AI. They just needed to figure out what was the right approach to all of the information that they were gathering to kind of create that. And so what we're seeing is we need to understand first if we're ready for it and if we have the right tools in place for it. Otherwise, it's just going to be just banging yourself against the wall and trying to force something that we're not ready as an organization yet. And we need to figure out as well what is important for the long-term strategy of AI. So one of the cases that we have seen recently that worked was one of our partners created this tool to kind of eliminate the accent when people are having conversations. So that worked very well with support companies where you have a base in India, for example. So this tool in real time kind of smoothed that out accent and was really well received by end customers. So there's a lot of really creative solutions like that. That's something that maybe you don't think about right away. When you think AI, you think ChatGPT, right? And just having a chatbot for everything. But there are a lot of different creative solutions of having AI make basic decisions, understand some documentation, like this one of having a real-time a change of accent. So there's a lot of creative solutions that once you sit down and kind of understand the needs of the company, you can start pinpointing what is the right solution for the problems they're having and not just throw AI at the wall and say, please fix everything. So that's one of the approaches that we're seeing that has worked with companies that we have worked with.
Great. I want to ask you one more question because I feel like this is a super applicable one for lots on the call. What is actually moving the needle for an organization in terms of digital experience, ideal digital experience? How are they improving digital experience at scale? And can you share some stories or examples?
Right. Yeah. So that depends a lot on what you mentioned, that the area, the area where the company is working with. What we have seen a lot, and I mentioned in one of our cases, and I want to stress this a lot because this is something we have seen in the US particularly, is the documentation side of things, where there's a lot of different documentation that needs to go with compliance that we like from our side here in Central America. We don't have that amount of documentation, and it is always staggering to us, and it is always crazy to us to come in and see all the requirements. But that is something that is really, really moving the needle with a lot of companies to kind of have all of these like huge processes that are very document heavy, just have very easy and quick automations that can come in and just half the time of doing that, or even like reduce it by more than that. So that's something that is really moving the needle right now, even though it's not as sexy as saying an AI coming in and doing all the work. But if we come down to results, that's one of the biggest ones that we have seen so far. That's from like a use case perspective. From an organizational wide perspective, and that's why I brought our financial institution example, is having that human approach. I don't know why there's a very big resistance to like people just want to develop things and just come in and just do this application and let's just work and get it done. But really having the time to slow down a little bit, not too much, just a little bit, and have that previous of understanding our customers, understanding what they're seeing, and making sure that they're that what we're building is for them, really is helping, like I said, for this organization, this financial institution that we came in. It really created a roadmap that they were happy with working with us on. So they said, well, yeah, we now understand the root cause of our problems. Maybe we did not understand previously, and we just thought maybe we have to implement SAP and that will solve everything. And then no, that wasn't it. So maybe we need to implement a new CRM or something like that. And maybe that's part of the solution, but you need to first take a step back and understand why the users are not happy, why are the employers not happy, and then you can create long-term value. So that's the one that I would say it's very hard to see. We receive a lot of push from it, but that's where we really see the long-term value, where companies start seeing after even less than a year, they start seeing bigger returns that they would if they just try to solve the small problem that they're having right now with a little patch and just say, yeah, we did it. So that's one of the if you're going to talk about merits and about what's moving the needle, are those two things, right? I would say that that user approach is really, really, really the one that we're trying to focus a lot of, because most people that we have talked to are not focusing on that and they're not seeing the value in that. So we love to prove them wrong.
Great. Well, are there any kind of final thoughts, parting thoughts you could leave us with, Luis, before we can wrap up?
Yeah, so I've been hammering down a lot on the user and everything. But really, one of the things I want to leave you with is the technology that we have today is very powerful. Like what AI can do in the right mindset, what automation can do in the right place, what these tools combined can do is unbelievable. And we're really trying to create a space where we focus on the three areas that I mentioned at the beginning: the business, the user, and the technology, to have them work together and create these new tools that work in the long term. That if one of them kind of shakes a little bit, we can adjust that part, and the tool itself or the solution itself, because sometimes it's not a tool, sometimes it's a strategy, a solution, works in the long term. So I really want everyone to go away of this conversation to understand that, yes, we have a lot of very powerful AI tools, a lot of very powerful automation tools that are doing a lot of great work. But even the better work comes when we integrate and make sure we understand that business side of things, so that we can have returns in the short, mid, and long term for our transformation, and that the users are on board so that they push our transformation with us. And then we can have a great scenario where the organization itself is pushing forward this transformation. So I really wanted to focus on that, to make sure that we take that with us and understand that whenever a vendor comes in, if they're just focused on this great tool that does a lot of these things, you kind of also ask them, okay, but how are our users going to handle it? What's it going to do for the business? And make sure that we keep in mind that these three pillars need to be together. Otherwise, you'll have this talk again in 6 months, a year, 2 years, where the tools kind of never got the chance to run and shine. So that would be my closing thoughts on the matter.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Luis. Informative presentation, awesome answers to all the questions. Alejandro, did you want to say anything before I close it out?
Yeah, thank you, Alex. I just wanted to thank you for helping us organizing this event, and also thank Luis for being the presenter today, and each one of you who participated in the session. We want to continue the conversation, so we want to have a follow-up meeting, bring Luis to the virtual session, and maybe just have a conversation about um, how these areas can apply to your organization. So expect an email from me with additional information of how to keep moving forward with these topics. Thank you very much, everyone.
Yeah, and thank you to Ulysses Tech for sponsoring today's session. As I mentioned before, this session has been recorded, so I'll send the recording out to everyone who's registered for this session later today. And thank you for being here. Head to nctech.org if you have any questions about NC Tech. And I look forward to seeing y'all on the next one. Have a great rest of your week.